Testing. Did I not enable auto starts? I must not have. All right. Well, I'm live now, and that's what matters. Every day it's a little different. Every day it's a little different. Anyway, I'm going to go just a minute here and give my hordes of fans an opportunity to join in before I start talking about why Joe Jorgensen is the opportunity to save America. Yep, that's right. I'm not. We're not going small today, buddy boy. It's Friday. It's my anniversary. I'm coming on early because we need to talk about this, and I got to get out, take my wife to dinner. So I'm going to do this nice and early and get it over with. In this day and age, with everything that's going on in this country, I am absolutely 100% convinced that we need to vote third party more than we ever have in the past. It's funny because when you talk about voting third party, I think one of the things we all hear constantly is this election is too important to vote for a third party. Michelle Obama said it. Who else? Another Democrat brought that up. Michelle Obama said now's not the time to mess around with somebody who can't win. Obviously a reference to third parties. And somebody else said something, and I can't think of who. If somebody jumps on here and jumps in the chat, let me know. I know another Democrat said something opposing the idea of voting for a third party candidate. And I like it. I like that they're doing that because to me that means there's a little bit of fear out there, and a little bit of fear is exactly what we want to see. Maybe there's even more fear than that. I like that the two primary candidates, particularly the Democrats, I think the Democrats are in big trouble. I think they know that they're in big trouble, and I think that's why they really want to make sure they're the ones who are addressing the third party. They're the ones who are addressing Dr. Joe Jorgensen because they know that a lot of their voters are very unhappy with their choices, and I think a lot of Democrats could leave the Democrat Party and vote for Joe Jorgensen. And because of that, I think you're going to hear Democrats, like you heard Michelle Obama talk about, this election's too important, don't waste all the typical refrains you hear when they're talking about voting for a third party or when you're talking about voting Libertarian. We've all heard it. If you've been around the party at all, you've heard it. So I'm going to talk today about why Joe Jorgensen isn't just the best candidate, but why Joe Jorgensen specifically can save America. And if you are watching the news, if you are seeing what is going on out there, you know where we're coming from. You know how divided this nation is. You know we're at a crossroads, and there are specific things that need to be changed in a systemic way, in an absolute 100%. This has to be completely different. This has to be a level of change that you have never seen before in order for us to move this nation forward. So thank you guys for the happy anniversary wishes. I appreciate that. But we have to look at what is going on in this country, and we have to look at the two candidates, and we have to figure out, we have to understand that neither of them is going to offer the kind of change that we need to move this country forward and to get past what we're in right now. And this is why Joe Jorgensen she's not the best choice. She is the only choice. People say this election is too important to vote for a third party candidate. No, folks, this election is too important to keep voting for the same old. We have to make real systemic change. So let me get into it. First things first, and this is not the most important thing that will be on President Joe Jorgensen's agenda, but it is the one that's getting the most attention in the media right now. So I want to talk about it first, and that is criminal justice reform. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff out there in regards to what needs to change. One of those things is in the light of the Breonna Taylor death is the end of no-knock warrants. Ending qualified immunity so that officers can be held accountable for their actions. Both of those things are important. Both of those things absolutely need to happen. But our criminal justice system is Jenga. You can't take it apart from the bottom. You got to take it apart from the top. You have to work your, and I don't know how Jenga works, so maybe I'm using the wrong analogy, but you disassemble our criminal justice system from the top down, not the bottom up. You've got to change the laws at the top first and work your way down through the criminal justice system. You want to end qualified immunity for the police. That's perfectly fine. But if you do that before you end the war on drugs, if you do that while the profit motive, the perverse motive for getting into drug dealing still exists, you are turning the streets over to gangs. And guess who's going to be most negatively impacted by that? People living in low-income neighborhoods are going to be most impacted by that, and that's disproportionately going to have an impact on minorities. So ending qualified immunity is absolutely something I want to do, but we have to end the drug war first. It has to be priority number one when it comes to criminal justice reform. And if we don't do that, if we don't end the war on drugs and we try and make all these other reforms to the police department, you're asking for higher crime rates and you're asking for more minority victims. So we have to fix and we have to end the war on drugs. And the only candidate in the presidential race who wants to end the war on drugs is Dr. Jo Jorgensen. She's the only one. So we can pass bills to end qualified immunity, and we can pass bills to end no-knock raids, and we can do all these different things. But if we're still trying to fight a war on drugs, then these things are just going to have negative impacts. And for those who don't remember history, you're bound to repeat it, right? When we think about how we got here, how did we get to this massive militarized police force? How did we get to a state of mass incarceration? This is because we decided we wanted to fight this war on drugs. We wanted to lock people up. We wanted to be law and order. And the Democrats were getting their butts kicked over and over again by Republicans. And so they jumped right on the law and order train. That's why Joe Biden wrote that 94 crime bill. Now, you could dislike Joe Biden because he wrote that bill. I certainly do. But he did it because they were just following the Republicans' lead because the Republicans were winning races. So at the end of the day, both parties are on this law and order train, this fighting the war on drugs train. And quite frankly, you're protecting two people when you're fighting a war on drugs. You're fighting pharmaceutical companies, and you're protecting pharmaceutical companies, and you're protecting drug dealers. That's who the war on drugs is defending. So we absolutely have to end the war on drugs, and then we can start working our way down through the rest of the criminal justice system. Then we can start fixing all these other things. Because when you end the war on drugs, guess what police don't need to do? They don't need to pull you over for no reason. They're not pulling you over for no reason. They're pulling you over because they're trying to find drugs. That's what's happening. We can stop locking up young black men because they smoked pot or because they have a little pot on them. We can stop doing that. We can end mass incarceration. We can stop destroying black families, white families. This is something that people don't understand about mass incarceration and the war on drugs. Since 1970, I want to say 1971, something like that, the prison population, the white prison population has increased by 240%. And the black prison population has increased by 280%. Now, this whole Black Lives Matter movement, this whole criminal justice reform movement is centered around the fact that this is disproportionately impacting people of color. It is impacting them more, for sure. But if you look at the massive growth in prison populations among both races are suffering under an authoritarian government. And one of the most powerful tools of an authoritarian government is war. And if you want to wage war on your own citizens, a war on drugs is a great way to do it. It's a great way to build a massive police state. It's a great way to militarize the police, to increase the number of police, to create a huge number of excuses to throw people behind bars. And as some of you have watched maybe some of my prior videos regarding fixing the 13th Amendment, it also provides a massive amount of cheap labor because there are massive labor contracts between big business and for-profit prisons in terms of providing prison labor. It's a disgusting thing, and the war on drugs is one of the main tools. And Jo Jorgensen is the only candidate who wants to eliminate the war on drugs. Then we can work our way down. We've got to eliminate all victimless crimes. She's the only one who's talking about that. Now, people will say, what's a victimless crime? How can a crime not have a victim? I'm going to go someplace a little controversial, and I'm going to tell you that sex work is work and that prostitution being illegal is nothing but a war on women. And it also enables human trafficking. It gives power to pimps and people who would abuse women and take advantage of women who are vulnerable. And it takes the power away from women to control their own destiny. My body, my choice, right? So that's got to apply all the way around. So we have to eliminate victimless crimes. That includes prostitution. That includes drug use. Some of these things are uncomfortable. Some of these things are difficult conversations, but freedom is that way. Freedom is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be difficult. The conversations aren't supposed to be easy. If it doesn't challenge you a little bit, it's not free. Freedom is dangerous, and we have to live in that world, not the safe little cocoon where we think government's going to protect us from everything. Because that thought process is what's gotten us to this point, where our nation is literally tearing itself apart. The next thing that Joe Jorgensen can fix, that I don't think either candidate is going to be able to fix, and I don't think either political party has any desire to fix, is the education system in this country. George Carlin said it brilliantly when he said that the last thing government wants is a nation full of critical thinkers. They don't want that. They don't want you educated. They don't want you capable of critical thought. They want you ignorant. They want you dumb. They want you easy to manipulate. They want you, as George Carlin said, just smart enough to operate the machines and push around the paper, but too stupid to realize your government's screwing you. He used language that's a little bit more direct than that, but that's the point. I got a bit of an itch here. So we have to fix the education system. And how do we do that? We take the money and we put it in the hands of the parents. That's how we fix education. And nobody wants to do that. And I don't know why. If it's fear of, I think for some, it's fear that the institution of public education will cease to exist. Well, I have an interesting libertarian thought on that. And that is that if you are afraid that a free market in education will eliminate the public education system, then the public education system is no good and it can't compete. I don't care about institutions. I do not care about the institution of public education. I don't care. I care about the education of the kids. So who is afraid of ending public education? And I'm not even talking about ending public education. I'm saying take the money out of the hands of government and put it in the hands of parents and let parents and communities decide how to spend those education dollars. And then let's see. When I've ran for office twice, and I have brought this up both times that I've ran, and I can tell you who's afraid of putting the money in the hands of the parents, that is white suburban women. They're the ones who came up and talked to me after these things, always. White suburban women, white women living in rural communities. Why are they afraid of losing their schools? Why are they so defensive of public education? Because little Johnny and little Sarah are already getting good educations in their schools. And what they fail to understand is take your money and give it right back to that school. Then if you're happy with your public school, the money's going to your hands. Put it back in there. Who's trapped? Who's stuck? The people living in poor neighborhoods, the people living in inner cities. And who's that disproportionately affecting? It's disproportionately affecting minorities. Hope comes from education. Putting education in the hands of parents will create a massive influx of investment in education from the private sector. A massive. There's a huge opportunity. And you know where those investors are going to go first? They're going to go to the poorest neighborhoods because that is where the demand for better education is. You see, investment follows demand. There's a huge demand for better education in our inner cities. There's a huge demand for opportunity for young people growing up in poverty. Education is the lifeline of hope to those people. Putting the money in the hands of the parents will flood investment in education from the private sector into these poor areas, creating much better educational opportunities. And I would say, that in the long run, these poor inner city children will end up better educated than their middle class and wealthy counterparts going to public schools in the suburbs and in richer neighborhoods. Why? Because even in a good neighborhood with a good school in a good area, it's still public education and it's not great because it's not subject to competition. So the best schools, the privately ran schools, are going to end up in the poorest neighborhoods first. And in a generation, you're going to have high school graduates from poor families in the inner city having kids with higher educational outcomes, better educational outcomes, better prepared to enter the workforce than kids from rich suburban neighborhoods, from upper middle class neighborhoods. And then that demand will spread out into those areas. You want to change everything within the next 10 years? Let parents put that money in the hands of parents and let private industry come in and invest in education in these areas. That is what Joe Jorgensen would want to do. Dr. Joe Jorgensen would want to free up education so that parents can make the best decisions for their own children. And that is important, and that changes the world. Education changes everything. Now, here I can tell you already what the objection to that is going to be. Okay, and the objection to that is going to be kids aren't commodities. I've heard the argument. Kids aren't commodities. We shouldn't commoditize this, and we don't want for-profit education. Yeah, absolutely. We want for-profit education. And this is where better education changes the world, because we have to understand how economics works. We have to understand that. All right. So there are two ways. There are essentially two prices you pay in an economy. One, in a centrally controlled and a centrally planned economy, you pay for inefficiency. Inefficiency because central planning is not good. Things that are planned centrally aren't good. You can't get a consensus. You don't know where the needs are. You can't respond to quick demands. It's the same reason that big business needs to be protected by government. It's because big, huge businesses can't adapt to the marketplace as fast as smaller, more agile businesses can. So the massive bureaucracy of government that controls education is incredibly inefficient, ridiculously inefficient. And that steals away value. The other thing is, the other price you pay in an economy, and in a free market economy, is profit. Profit is the price you pay for higher efficiency. Now, and I'm kind of quoting some Thomas Sowell, as some of you who've been following me know, I'm reading his book, Basic Economics, right now. But it's so clear and logical. If you look historically, every centrally planned economy has a significantly lower standard of living than the free market economies do. It's just, there's a reason people in Cuba get on a door and try and float to the United States of America. There's a reason people want to come here, but we don't have to use guns to keep people in, right? People want to be here because a free market economy creates significantly more opportunity and a significantly higher standard of living. So within our free market economy, we look at the government entities like public education. It's a centrally controlled entity. And so it's incredibly inefficient. If we allow profit to come in, it'll become much more efficient. Because how do you make a profit in a free market economy? You efficiently provide something of high value to a consumer. And you're going to provide it. And as soon as that is recognized as something that is profitable, other people are going to enter the market, and they're going to try and do it better than you so that they can take your profits away. And you're going to have a constant stream of competition of people trying to get better and better and better at doing something so that they can earn your money. So people say, well, profit's fine for TVs and cell phones, but you can't do that with like healthcare and education. Well, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'm very, very glad that cell phones and big screen TVs aren't suffering the poor quality and high inflation of education and healthcare. Right? These things that are less regulated. This TV behind me, I paid, the first time I bought a TV this size, it cost me like thousands of dollars. I bought this thing for like $400, brand new. And it's better than the other one was. So that's what competition does. The profit margins become razor thin because everybody wants it. Every family in the United States of America with a child wants better education. The competition would be fierce. And we need to open up our educational system to that competition to improve educational outcomes. And that is something that Dr. Joe Jorgensen would absolutely be doing. Lastly, and this is not a specific economic issue, this is an issue of society. This is a societal issue, I guess, is probably the best way to put this. I'm libertarian. So what does that mean? For me, the core of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle, which is you're not allowed to hurt people or take their stuff. It's really kind of that simple. You're not allowed to enact force against somebody who except in self-defense. That's it. It seems like a pretty simple concept, but some people seem to have a difficult time with it. But that's the non-aggression principle. The second is with libertarianism, there's an absolute disregard of identity politics because libertarianism focuses on the individual person. It is the literal political embodiment of Martin Luther King's dream. Libertarianism says every single person is an individual and should only be judged on their own individual qualities. In an era where everything in this country right now is about race, everything has to circle back to race. The libertarian ideal of non-identity politics, of the individual person, sets aside these arbitrary, silly things like the color of a person's skin as some kind of a virtue or value or something that has any level of meaning. It's a simple physical characteristic. Both parties are stoking these flames, and they have been for a long time. I think the Democrats are more guilty of it than the Republicans, and if you're a Democrat, you probably think the other way around, and I don't care, but I want to stop talking about race, and I want to start talking about solutions. And the bottom line is the only political party out there that really has at its core an ideology of the individual above a particular group is the Libertarian Party. Peace. And both political parties do it. And the Libertarians won't. It's the antithesis. It's the exact opposite of what libertarianism is. It's the exact opposite of what libertarians stand for. So what you need now is a president to take the reins of this nation and say each individual will be given the same rights. There's no such thing as black rights, white rights, gay rights. None of that exists. There's only the right of the individual to pursue and live their life however they see fit, as long as they are not interfering with anybody else's right to do the same thing. That's it. That's the right. And government exists purely to protect that. We need to elect a president who believes that. And a libertarian like Joe Jorgensen is the candidate who believes that. So when they say to you, when you say, I'm voting third party, I'm voting Joe Jorgensen, and they tell you that this election is too important to vote for a third party candidate, I want you to stand up and say, no, this election is too important to vote for the status quo, because it is the status quo that has gotten us to this point. It's these two parties that have gotten us to a boiling point in this country. And if we're going to change it and we're going to fix things, we have to walk away from that status quo. That's just all there is to it. I wanted to come on. I wanted to talk about Joe Jorgensen today. It is Friday. I hope you guys are going to have a great weekend. I appreciate you all for stopping by. If you are new here, if this is your first time seeing my stream, I always forget to say this at the beginning. If you are new here and this is the first time watching me, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. I do a live stream daily, Monday through Friday. Typically, I start at 7 p.m. I don't know if I'm going to switch that back to 3 p.m. I keep going. I'm kind of back and forth, still dialing in the schedule. But turn on those notifications. You won't have to worry about missing it. And if you really value the content, please share it amongst your friends, because that is how I will grow. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.